Hello everyone, Master Xeon1201 here, and in this video we'll be going over the improvements and changes that have taken place for HardOps 987_11. For this update we wanted to make some improvements with curve extract. Also array v2 is always on the table for improvements. Multi-edit tool, selection of boolean, and .ui has been added to blank light, solidify, screw, displace. In addition to having some improvements done with the ability to use vertex groups with cloth. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in and get to it. Curve extract is located in the Q menu for edit mode. So if we tab into edit mode and we select an edge, we can press Q and there's an option here for curve extract. And by clicking it, it will convert your selection to a curve. And that's where the problems begin. Here I am in an older version of Blender using the LTS along with an older version of HardOps using 987.9. If we press Ctrl B and we bevel this, we can select this edge, hold Ctrl, click this edge, and if we press Q and choose curve extract, we see that the result behaves as expected. However, if we perform a boolean on the surface and we make that same selection, we see that it also performs as expected. However, if we throw a wrench in here and try doing a join operation like so, and then tap into edit mode and we decide to turn this into a curve extraction, we see that the result is definitely not what was expected. And while this can be cool, it definitely isn't what you should expect to get whenever you're using curve extract with the selection in edit mode. So let's press X and delete this, and we bring up the current version of Blender where we're using HardOps 987.11. and we try the same example. We bevel this, we know that'll be fine with the curve extract. We perform a difference, we know that will work right with the curve extract. And let's also do a join, and we'll just extrude it up, and let's just select here, hold Control, select all the way to here, and we perform a curve extract, and we see that the result is exactly as intended. And that's basically the gist of this improvement with curve extract for this update. An additional note about curves in the context in which I use them with HardOps, just to show a quick demonstration in action, we'll just select this edge, bevel it, and we'll select this edge all the way across, all the way to here, and all the way back up. And we purposely didn't bevel the bottom for the purposes of this demonstration, but we can press Q and we get curve extract, and we see that we get a result that looks something like this. And we can press S, and that will at least shade it smooth, and we could just click and complete this operation. However, this is definitely not the intended result. In fact, at the back, let's say that we were to extrude down. In the event we were going for a piece extruding down at the beginning of this curve, we see that the curve becomes irregular. And this is where some of the built-in add-ons of Blender can come in handy. For example, if we press F4 and we go into our preferences, by searching for curve, you can enable something called curve tools. And when you have curve tools enabled, it allows you to be able to select points on the vertices of a curve, right click, and have an option for something like fillet. And by filleting it, we see that it's got its volume back, and we can actually go in the F9 menu and adjust its preferences or adjust its properties for how much roundness is being given to it. Another thing about curve is that we're using it in the context of just pressing Q and adjusting the curve. However, we do have two curve capabilities as well. So I'll just shift right click to place my cursor, and then we'll shift to A, place a curve, Bezier curve circle, and we'll tap into edit mode, just scale this circle down just because I know it's going to happen. And with our circle selected, we'll select this object, press Q, and choose curve bevel. And now this object has actually been made into the curve bevel object. And one of the benefits of this is that we're able to press G, Y, X and move this freely, and it will actually adjust the offset of the curve in case you're ever wondering how you would get an offset on a curve. Now I have this actually overlap in the form somewhat, and I can just select this, end the mesh, press Alt X, and use a modifier mirror on it because our mirror system also supports curves. But I just wanted to show a little bit about how I use curves in the context of HardOps to create quick railings and things like that. When it comes to empty and our array v2, there's multiple ways to approach it, but just to demonstrate them in action, I'm just going to create a cut with Boxcutter, shift it to live, and then press Q and go into array. And so right now we're adjusting this with array. If I were to press E, we're actually exiting this with an empty, as it says via the notification. If we click and apply, we see that there's now an empty at the end location. We can actually move this empty around, go vertical with it, and all sorts of things, but we can also rotate it in order to adjust what's happening in between as far as the count, because it's connected with a bunch of drivers. At the time it was created, I actually wanted something a little bit more traditional that was actually working with the object system, even though I found this one to be kind of an endearing version that's really cool with the whole driver, getting them in between. Another way to approach it is with our new system of Shift-D to actually set it. So we drew a shape, and I'm just pressing Q and choose an array, and we'll just put an array on this. But this time I'm actually going to press Shift-D to exit with a regular driver target. And we see with this that there's no magic when we rotate it. It actually just rotates the whole empty, but we're also able to scale it, and all the pieces will sequentially grow in accordance with, I guess, some sort of matrix calculation. But one of the things I like using it for is actually getting really precise with layering things up. I mean, we could have done it with the other one. However, there's all this extra fluff to it that just makes it a little bit more daunting. And sometimes I don't need a driver. I just need a simple object target like we have in this case, where basically our array has an object offset. So in short, that's basically what the true empty target support is all about. Instead of having it have a driven system, there's one where it just sets an empty to the object field of the array, so you can adjust it after the fact in the form of an object mode transformation rather than having to go inside array all over again. Keep in mind, of course, that once you go inside array, that the empty is removed and you're back to where you started as far as dealing with it. So we will need to deal with the resume capabilities as far as allowing you to go back and keep your empty as a locked state or something, but that's always something worth contemplating. So another improvement that was had was with the ability to resume from multiple axes, or its ability to resume when jumping from array to array. So to show this in action, we're just going to draw a box, shift it to live using an older version of Boxcutter and HardOps, and we'll just add an array. And let's just press V to jump to 3D. We'll press A to add a second array, and we'll just make it a grid array. And so now let's jump in and go in and make adjustments. We see that we're able to adjust it on the correct axis for the first one. However, if we jump to the second one, we see that we're not actually adjusting it on the correct axis, which results in a rather strange experience. This actually will cause you to have to press X multiple times in order to get it back on the correct axis, and then you can move it as you would normally expect. This is something that we wanted to improve in this latest update. So if I minimize that version of Blender and we go into the current where we're using the latest version, we'd bring out a box, shift it to live, and let's go inside array, do the same thing as before where we basically array. We can press V to use 3D mode. We can press A to add a second array where we're able to scroll and choose how many we have in between. Click to apply, and then from here let's go back into array. So we see that we're able to extend and subtract on the array like normal. We can move the mouse and it behaves as you would expect. If we press Control and we scroll, we see that now on the other axes that is now behaving as you would expect. So just letting you know that even the micro behaviors are things that we care about immensely, and just letting you know that there's been improvements that's been had with the Array v2 in this update as far as having it resume better when jumping from array to array. When it comes to Array v2, we have multiple interface methods for users to interact with. If we press Q and we choose array, we can of course begin moving the mouse in order to interact with it in what we call fast mode. But if we press tab, we see that the UI now expands out in order to allow you into the .ui. From here, we could shift scroll over parameters to make fine adjustments. We can roll in a unshifted manner in order to move in a larger increment. But we also added an option at the top where basically you can roll between the multiple arrays and also adjust them individually. This was something that was done in the previous version, but I believe I forgot to mention it. Of course, there's also an option for you to be able to click and exit with an empty, which will leave you with empties that you're able to adjust after the fact. We still need to add support for true empties, but just letting you know in the event that you want to control it with the previous empty system that I was showcasing, where you can actually rotate the empty and adjust the count and things like that, as well as spring it out and give it more quantity if needed, depending on what you're going for. That is of course available inside the .ui as well. Even in older versions of HardOps, you can go under the HardOps logo and the star in order to choose what type of array you actually begin using via the opt-in. So I'm going to choose the 3D version of array, and we'll just create a box cut and bring it in. And let's look at this from the side. So now that we're starting our array in 3D mode and we're looking at it from a flat orthographic mode, whenever we start array, we see that it lets us work in 3D, but it shows this notification saying that Ortho view is not available, which is actually inaccurate. As we see in this case, Ortho view is actually working, and we're able to use 3D with our movement in order to get the array result that we want. In fact, we could even press A, X in order to change the axis in case it's not moving with our mouse movement to get a grid array, and we see that we were able to get the result. However, the ortho side view not available, still displaying. So this was something that really was more of a message error than it was a programming error. So this is something that we also resolved. So showing the same example, we'll press Alt V, make our view HQ just so we see what we're doing. And we press Q and we go into array, we see that we're able to add our array. There's no notification for it. We can press A, change our axis in order to add one, and perform the same maneuver just as easily without any pesky notification telling us what we can and can't do. Sometimes I'll model a part over and over in repetition to just kind of test alternative workflows to try to come up with the most optimal solution. In the setup for this slide, I was going to do something in reference to some stairs, so I just wanted to show a fun way that I was doodling around with some stairs to come up with the most optimal way to actually create some stairs. So let's just select this edge and we'll press Ctrl X in order to dissolve it. We'll press Ctrl R in order to place a loop cut on this end gun. Because it's an end gun, we know that the loops aren't going to go around the form at all, they're just going to stay constrained to this area. One of the benefits of using end gun. So we click to place it, and I tried a variety of solutions in order to try to turn these into stairs. For example, I pressed Alt V in order to rip the geometry out and take it a certain direction, which seemed like it was almost cool, except I would have to do some mirror magic with view, and really that's inorganic as a process to demonstrate. So let's right click that. Also tried other methods like beveling it and actually giving it one edge, but that actually offsets it to a different region than where I want it for all these to be equal stairs. So the key to it is actually rolling to put one loop in the middle, and then from there I can just offset these. It doesn't matter how much they're offset, but I can select the bottom loop of each of them, dissolve it, select each of these loops, which is about 10 different clicks right there. But we could press GG in order to slide these at each other, and then from here press Ctrl Shift Tab in order to change our snap mode to vertice, and by pressing GZ we can actually snap it up to snap to this region. And then in order to fix the bottom, we can actually just press Ctrl R, add a loop cut, slide it all the way down, press G, Z, hold Control while hovering over this area, and we can just snap it there, and just like that we've created a set of stairs. There's also some really good Blender add-ons that make stairs. I think stairs is like a rite of passage or something, but now we actually have some stairs to jump on to the next example. Let's interrupt this release log with a quick detour, just showing what we can pull off with these enhancements with array and true empty and all that with a set of stairs. So I'm just going to tab into edit mode and we'll select this face and we'll shift click curve extract in order to extract this piece off into its own piece. From here we can press Q, go into array, and we can attempt to move it, but we need to press X in order to change our axes. And let's just roll the wheel to add enough pieces in between. However, my mouse is getting off cursor, so let's press V to switch over to 2D mode, and we can actually just roll a few more segments in. We just want to make sure that we have more than enough steps. In order to get this to go correctly on the next axis, this would be a good time for me to press pause and bring up the dot UI where I could just begin scrolling on the Z in order to move it up. From here we see that even shift scrolling on the Z isn't going to get this exactly where I want. In fact, to really get this precise, I need a little bit more control. So I'm going to press Shift E, even though I'm still inside this .UI using a hotkey in order to exit with an empty target, and just by clicking we can actually exit and we have an empty for us to adjust. And just transforming empties in order to get arrays just right just feels a lot easier. Even though I can't see the empty, I can still just press G and move my mouse and I'm able to see exactly where I'm getting it positioned, and then everything looks good. So far so good, and we have our stair set up. So I'm going to press Q, we'll lower our solidification just slightly, and the next thing we'll do from here is just select this edge, Shift E, E, Z, we'll just bring this down maybe to about there, looking at this stair for reference, and I'll press L while hovering over this, press Alt N in order to bring up my normals menu, and we'll just flip my normal. We'll press P to separate that selection. And also the shading in the viewport just looks terrible, so I'll press Alt V, we'll jump to EVHQ just to get that looking better. And let's just bring this piece out, and just like that we actually have a set of stairs made. So from here I always go a little sci-fi with these staircases and these examples, so we'll just begin cutting some pieces in. We see that we can't just willy-nilly just go cut into random stairs. We need to cut into the progenitor stair. So with everything in place, we'll just cut here, just making random little box cuts. We'll press D, maybe not, switch over. And just begin cutting us some booleans. In this particular result, we'll press W to get out of wedge. Maybe SX and we scale it, noticing that the bevel no longer skews whenever we scale. Kind of a long time bug in Boxcutter. Let's press Alt X and we'll mirror this using HardOps mirror modifier. And from here, let's continue on detailing the surface. So we'll cut a wedge in this area. We can just come down this with a straight box, but press B in order to bevel. And this is what we're looking at. So really short work on these particular stairs today. So now with this piece, we can just really come up with a game plan for how we want to destroy this. So we'll draw a box, press B, press T, give it some thickness, hold Control for some dots, and we'll just perform a wedge cut. Maybe one here as well. And then what we want to do is Alt X, mirror this to the other side. That's going to give us that edge in the middle that you just saw, which will allow us to use it as a jump off point. And we could just extrude this piece back, press W to get rid of wedge, roll a bevel in this, and press V in order to array. And because of the mirror and sorting and all that, we can just have everything taken care of. And let's just Control click bevel to add a bevel on this. Press 1 to adjust the auto smooth. And Stair is just one of those things that as you're working on them, they just become infinitely more interesting as you continuously add cuts to them, because I mean, well, they're freaking stairs, you know. So let's just alt click sharpen to get it looking pretty good. Let's select the entire stair mesh that we were dealing with, add a bevel to that, alt click sharpen to get it shaded just right. And just like that, we're looking at a set of stairs. Alt M, Control click, add a blank material, and we see that really there's nothing left for us here. So let's bring in a circle, kind of a weight there. We won't talk about that. Press X. In fact, let's make sure that we're not under exact. Alright, and we're not, so carry on. We'll select this piece, alt click to give it an emissive material. We see that every piece received that as well. And if we want to have some fun, you know, while we're in Boxcutter, let's just perform a box cut in this particular area. Let's press B in order to bevel. But let's press X to convert it to a slice, and let's press Alt X to convert it into a recut, so we get back a version that's unmodified by all the modifiers we're using. So with our naked slice, we'll just cut inside of that, add one of these numbers, let's shift it to live, and let's use one of the Hops tool features of creating a grid. So I'm just going to shift click diamond, which will actually place that shape in this selection. And there we go. So let's get this mirrored to the other side. And I purposely set this up so I would have to mirror this to, well, I would have to array this to all these other areas. So let's actually set that up. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stairs. So not bevel. We want to go under modifier and choose array. V, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, I don't know why I'm counting. We have computers for that. So I'm going to exit with an empty target, which means that somewhere in this is an empty, and it's here. So we just bring up our grill, place it with the rest. But what we want to do is actually judge the top stair and make sure that that one's getting a good grill. And let's give this one a blank material as well. And with blank material, I always play a gamble, you know, like once I jump into render mode, that's when I can tell what my final result's going to be. But before that, let's take a moment, press Q, and we want to use power save, but I'm going to control click it to bring up the prompt, and we're just going to call this, actually, before I do that, let's press Control Shift O, and we're calling these box stairs. There we go. I just wanted to make sure that we were using the same convention as before so that they would actually, and we did it. So that's fine. You know what's strange is whenever I do that and I go outside of convention, I will load up my power saves, right click. First we select it, delete. We see that it was box stairs, all one word. And now we're on box stairs 02. And let's jump over to render mode. And this is what our result looks like. We can of course press Alt VV to just cycle through various viewports, press V to actually turn off viewport display. But just like that, we're able to create some very quick stairs just playing around with the new features that are part of Array v2. And some Boxcutter, of course. And of course a little HardOps to tie everything off. When it comes to Boxcutter and edit mode, pressing Q will bring up the HardOps edit mode menu, and if we look at Mark, we see that shift clicking it will bring up the edit multi-tool. Edit multi-tool can also be brought up under the SD3 mesh tools under edit multi-tool, but my favorite way is bringing it up via shift clicking, the most prominent option in the Q menu. So to just show how I work with the multi-tool and some of the improvements that have been had with it, we'll just stretch this box in edit mode, and we'll just Control B to roll this out. And in order to set us up with something to merge, let's actually use Boxcutter, and we'll just start off with some dots, extrude this in, press W to turn off wedge, extrude it out, press B to round these bevels off, we'll press Control K in order to make it a knife, and then press spacebar. And so now there's a knife projection of the design we were drawing implanted into the model. And from here we can press S or press E, Y, S, Y, 0 in order to flatten it out, and we can press F in order to end that. So now comes one of my favorite games of actually understanding geometry. There's a bunch of additional geometry here, some of it's not needed. By shift clicking the select tool, there's a thing in select tool where basically if you have a selection in select tool, you can press B in order to bevel an edge. And so that's what I use to put like a spacer bevel in order to protect the integrity of this area while I actually begin refining this area. So if you look at this, you see that basically every extra edge that's created has spawned next to an edge that's actually of pertinence. So if we look at this, you would think, oh, I should just get rid of this edge because this edge isn't connected to anything. This edge is actually more critical to the foundation than the edge next to it. So an easy way to kind of clean this stuff up is by going inside of the auto merge vertices, and from here we could just see which of these are actually contributing to the curvature and which ones aren't, and begin merging them. So for this one, let's just shift click Mark, we can just select M and we'll just merge. Take a look at this area, let's just merge this one. This area is an easy judge, you can tell which ones aren't actually contributing to the form. With this one, I could tell that it's this one. For this one, I selected the wrong merge, so I actually merged in the wrong order. I could press Control Z in the modal, but in the event you have a selection, you have to drop it, you could always press C. Continuing on with our merge-a-thon, just judging these edges, we can see that this edge isn't actually critical for the form as much as the edges next to it. In fact, I feel that the more I do this, the more I ponder a solution to actually eliminate all the guesswork of having to do this as a user, but it's always fun to get in and just kind of understand the results that we get from our booleans and possibly why they occur. So with this done, we can now press spacebar and it's complete. However, one of the things I do like to do is bring up an edge loop and place it right down the middle in order to connect with this area. And then by shift clicking sharpen, we can lower to auto smooth, giving us a rather fine looking result. Even though this result is far from perfect, there are things that can be done to actually optimize this area even more with us redirecting choice areas in order to get the geometry to flow a little better. But normally I'll get this to a level that's actually competent, and then depending on the shading and artifacting, I'll refine it even more over time. But really with that, we're wrapped up with this. I can press Alt X, jump to something like bisect, and instead of bisect, we actually want to use bisect mod where it leaves a modifier afterwards. And let's do it to the other side as well. So now we've mirror modified, bisected to the other side. We can select this face, press I, press B in order to use the boundaries and ignore them and be a part of them instead of working against them as we would before, and then just extrude this in, and we've actually, began the foundations of this particular walkie-talkie study that I'm obsessed with. I just wanted to show some of the improvements that's happened with the multi-edit tool. Another improvement that's happened with it is in the event that you're merging geometry, you can actually make the points bigger. Sometimes I'm on a retina display, so if we jump over to select tool, we can press M to jump to merge, and we see that we're not really able to read our vertices, and it's because we didn't actually jump to vertice mode whenever we jumped into the tool. So we press Q and we shift click Mark in order to use Mark, and we see that our vertices are a certain size. Well, pressing plus and minus on the keyboard, whenever you're in merge mode, will actually make the vertices bigger. So in the event that you're having issues merging because you're on a high resolution laptop display or 4K, just know that you can go in, make the vertices as big as you want, and if you were to even right click and cancel, we see that the geometry actually goes back to the way it's supposed to be. And if we use merge again and we make the vertices big and we actually perform an operation and complete it, we see that the geometry also refers back to its original size. And this is because adjusting a vertice size is something associated with preferences. And I particularly don't want to have modals adjusting the preferences of the user without their consent, except for temporal state. So it's something that we're experimenting with. But in the event that you want to make your vertices bigger, you just need to go under your themes 3D view, and then you can choose how big you want your vertices to be in the 3D view. But just letting you know that plus and minus will scale down your vertices, adjusting the theme preferences on the fly whenever you're using merge as part of select tool. Selection of boolean has also seen some improvements in this update. To show selection boolean action, we'll just tab in, press 2 to select edges, and we'll just bevel this edge very quick, select this face, and then control click to this face to select everything in between. A few things I want you to notice is that whenever we use selection of boolean, that first it puts us in the inset phase, then we click and it puts us in the extrude phase, and then when we click, we're placed back in edit mode. That placing in edit mode was always a little bit strange, but selection of boolean has definitely gone through its share of adventure. In fact, it previously was very destructive and did not have the ability for it to drop you off with a Solidify modifier allowing you to do things like this in the event. But also it's more flexible than ever. So if we jump over to the latest version of HardOps, there's been some system improvements where it should actually behave a little bit faster than before, but also it now drops you in object mode. So if we select selection of boolean and we perform an operation, we click, we see that we're in object mode, but also the selection has been restored on the boolean object, which is an improvement, meaning that we could just press Q and quickly adjust the solidification. If we jump back to the previous version of Blender and we attempt that maneuver again with, say, this face on the side, press Q, go under ST3 mesh tools and selection of boolean, and we perform that operation, we see that we're dropped into edit mode and our selection is actually the main object, meaning that we have to give an additional click to selecting this and then press Q and adjust the solidification, which in my opinion is just a little bit extra. So to showcase that in action again, we select these two faces, we press Q, we go under booleans, choose selection of boolean, we perform our inset, we click, perform our extrude, click and apply, we still have our object selected. So it's just letting you know that you can now use selection boolean, selection to boolean even faster than ever, and it should be even better than it was before. It's still something that we're always in the process of improving. And also keep in mind that whenever you use selection of boolean on a flat shaded mesh, it will receive the results of that mesh. So right now this mesh is flat shaded, so I have to press Control tilde, go into helper, hit set smooth, and now these booleans are being reflected as smooth shaded objects. However, this one isn't. I could press Alt W, switch over to Hops tool, and just using Control, just hovering over the dots until I see the shape I want, bring this up and Control tilde, set smooth, and now this object has been made smooth. And of course I could just press Alt X, X to reset the mirror, mirror this, Q, ever scroll, bring it back, Q, solidify, and push this in even more in the event that I want to get an even more unique result, or bring it up in order to begin cutting out of the ring a little bit, which was kind of what I was going for. But selection of boolean can be a real easy way to just turn a selection into a boolean. It works better on late mesh objects, as I was showing in the Qbox demo. So here we have a slightly more complex model than the boxy example I was showing previous. And I'm just going to go in edit mode, select these pieces, control click to select to here, select this face, and then control click to here to select everything in between. If we press Q and we go to SC3 mesh tools and we just jump to selection of boolean, we see that we're able to perform our inset phase, we're able to click to perform our extrusion, and of course it's going to be a little bit slow because of how heavy things are, but we've now performed our extrusion on this particular mesh. So to show the next steps in action, we'll jump over to rendered mode where you can see the rendered result. And we've now just basically cut and inset into this piece. One of my favorite things with HardOps is with the bowl shape, pressing Q and going under the Q menu and selecting something like bowl shift in order to shift the bowl into something I need. In this case, I am actually going for a slash. So now that we have this slash, I can actually control click bevel to add a bevel on top. And let's alt click sharpen, and with this piece that's around it we can also control click bevel to just add a bevel on top. Press 1, narrow it down a little bit. Alt click sharpen in order to get the shading just right. And just like that, we've performed a slice of this section of the side of the model. So this is just one of the ways that I've been experimenting with selection of bowl on my Qbox demonstrations. In fact, to take it even further, I could just press Q, go under Smart Apply to apply everything that matters that's going to be getting in my way. And we'll just snap our cursor here and then press 3, jump to face mode. We'll select this face to this face, this face to this face. And by pressing period, we can set our snapping point to be 3D cursor, and we'll press S, X, 0 in order to flatten this. And now we actually have this piece just kind of extruding out in an interesting fashion with the inset around it still contoured to the form. So I've just been playing a lot with just form contouring lately whenever it comes to my box studies, but just to show a little bit of just how it can be applicable in an actual example, I wanted to just show how I've been using it with Qboxes. Blank light can be accessed through the Alt-V menu, so if we press Alt-V, we notice that there's an option for blank light. However, I typically press Alt-V, then B to jump into blank light, and then once you jump into blank light, you can begin rolling your wheel in order to scroll through various lighting setups for your scene. New to this version, you'll have the ability to press tab, and there will be a dot UI where you can actually go in and just roll over the dice in order to get various different lighting setups, but you're also able to save presets and load them inside of this new setup. And there's also buttons with tooltips to allow you to adjust various aspects of lights. So in the event that you want to just pause your setup and just go in and actually roll things generally, and also go in and toggle lights individually, in the event that you're trying to build things up, you can still do that without the expanded view, just showing how now that's possible inside the new .ui as part of blank light. So Solidify also has support for the .ui, so I'll tab in edit mode and select this one point, press X and delete it in order to set up this example. If we press Q and we go under add modifier, we can add a Solidify, and from here we see things get a little bit skewed. We can press tab and that will now pause the modal, allowing us to freely rotate and things like that, but it also opens the .ui. From here we see that there's an offset value where we can roll the wheel in order to adjust the offset values. There's also a toggle where by scrolling over it we can choose to use rim or only not rim. But also we can go in and adjust the offset and thickness on the fly. Of course, same rules apply, where basically alt scrolling over parameter will double that parameter exponentially, and scrolling backwards will halve it. But one of my favorite options to talk about is if we notice how the rim is just getting out of control, we can roll over the Solidify mode and jump between extrude and non-manifold, which is one of my favorite aspects about this new UI. So now we can actually give it any amount of thickness and the result will be at least more adequate than this. So just letting you know that Solidify now has the .ui in case you need to go in and type very specific parameters like 1.52. And notice now that also the UI flashes faster whenever it's waiting for text entry. So let's set this to something like 1.3. Let's set it to 0.3, and let's set the offset to something like 2, and we can just click to close it, and that is basically how you can get in and out of .ui as part of Solidify. You ever wished your cube was a plane? Sometimes I just use bisect mirror to do that. So we'll press Alt X to bring up mirror, and we'll scroll the wheel until we jump to bisect, and while holding shift I'm just going to click on the Z and then click on the opposite Z, and then I'm going to click on the X, which basically deleted everything and is now reduced us basically to a plane. From here I can press tab or press Q and go into our Q menu, and under add modifier we can click on screw to add a screw modifier. If we look over to the side, we see that there's now a dot, which means that we can expand it to go into the .ui. From here you can roll over segments in order to adjust how many segments, but also you're able to go in here and choose to flip your normals and also shift click in order to shade smooth, depending on if you have smooth shading enabled on your object. Another thing is that you can just click on this in order to flip your normals, but you can also shift click it in order to turn off the ability to calculate the normals. So sometimes you don't need it, sometimes you do. Another thing to also keep in mind is that if we click on this one for face orientation, this one will actually turn off the face orientation, so if it drives you crazy. But seeing that this is all red, that means that we should go over, click on the normals button, and then from there we can actually turn this off. Another thing too is that if you need to change your angle to 0, you can just click on angle, just type in 0, and now it's set to 0, but we actually want this to be 360 because this is an example similar to our typical cylinoid. We click to apply and we're done. So from here, I can just tab into edit mode, select a vert, control click mark in order to begin rolling this as far as being a bevel. Tab into object mode, select everything, and control click bevel in order to add a new bevel. Press D inside of Boxcutter to jump over a circle, and we'll just cut a circle in the middle, and just like that, we're on our way to creating a cylinoid, basically using a new screw system inside of HardOps. A .ui really is just a interface change with the way that you'll interact with your options, but I'll be showing a little bit more about how I use these modifiers as we get on with these examples. So extending on our previous example, we'll look at this from top view, go into orthographic, press D, switch over to box, and before even performing this operation, I'm going to select this and shift click Smart Apply in order to Smart Apply a duplicate, and on this duplicate we'll just perform our cut, but we'll press B in order to bevel it, we'll press X in order to change the slice, we'll press X again to change the intersect, and then we'll press spacebar in order to apply. And with this piece, we can now press Q, go under Add Modifier, and choose Displace. With Displace, one of my favorite things is actually rolling the wheel backwards, where instead of going forward through the axes, I can jump backwards and jump straight to normal, where I can push this out on this normal, giving me an interesting result. Notice that inside of Display, there's a dot over on the left side, meaning that if we press Tab, we can actually jump into the .ui. So from here, I can actually shift scroll over to strength to adjust it gradually. I can roll over the axis to choose particularly what displace option I want, whether I want a particular axis like X, Y, or Z, or if I want to use it on normal like I'm using in this particular case. So sometimes I'll use a Smart Apply duplicate with an intersect in order to bow it out like so, and then clicking to apply, I'm able to basically add a weld to it, and we'll just weld it to get it to look better, and then add a bevel on top, set our shading to something small by pressing 1 to set our auto smooth to 90, and then using array, we can just quickly add an array to move this down. And you might be wondering what this piece is. Let's actually resolve that. So what I'll have to do is apply to boolean, and then tab into edit mode and locate this piece and delete it, and from there we no longer have that piece. In fact, it's also present on the piece that we spun, and the only way to resolve that is just going into edit mode and deleting that particular edge, which will sometimes recalculate the normals to be in a different direction, but it'll definitely get rid of that pesky edge in the center. But I'm so used to it not showing up in render that it just doesn't bother me. So one of my favorite ways to use screw and solidify is to basically create a sidewall. So with this cube, I'm just going to tap into edit mode, press M, and we're going to merge this into a single vertex. And looking at this in top view, we're just going to extrude this out, extrude a couple of angles like so. Nothing really specific to it, just creating something interesting. We can press Q, bevel, and it will add a 2D bevel. We could even press 2 in order to ensure that our profile is reset to 0.5, giving us a more rounded result. From here, we can press Q, go under Add Modifier, and choose a screw. However, this time I'm going to press Tab, and instead of pressing 4 to turn this into an extrude, we can just go in and click on Angle and type in 0. And we want to actually screw this out, but we want to change the axis. So by rolling over to axis, we can choose what axis that we're actually screwing this out. And while looking at this in face orientation mode, we see that some of our geometry didn't actually make the way it's supposed to go as far as its normal orientation. So by clicking on the button for flip normals, we see that that doesn't do anything, but shift clicking it will turn on normal calculation as specified in the tooltip. So now we're able to get something a little bit more adequate. And for our segments, let's actually lower this down to something like 3, because we don't need that many segments going up and down on this. And to see what our segments look like, we can press Alt V and look at wireframe, but just from doing this thing over and over, I remember that segments should definitely not be 36. So from here, we can press Q, and let's add a solidify. So we could use solidify the quick way, where we press 1 to solidify this way, 2 to solidify on both ways, 3 to solidify on the opposite way. In this case, we actually want 2. And we could just click and apply without actually even bringing up the expanded UI. In fact, most of the time you'll see me working, I more than likely won't be needing the .ui. However, it is there for you in the event that you need to get more specific with your parameters. So even if you don't see me using it personally, doesn't mean that it's just not a good thing or something. It just means that, you know, I'm just more prone to the fast UI way of working, where I actually work through all of these hotkeys that I personally requested and get to my intended result. But our goal with the .ui is definitely to reduce the amount of hotkey overhead and have a UI based experience to allow people to get where they want to get to, even if they don't understand or know all the hotkeys that are required to use an operation to its fullest. So by clicking, we can just complete this, and from here let's just control click bevel to add a bevel, and alt click sharpen in order to put a weight at normal. And from here we can just use Boxcutter and just perform some cuts. We'll press B, press X, and now we've made that into a slice. And let's draw another one without any sense of if we're correct or not. So maybe jump into orthographic view, press S and X, press B to bevel, and move this precisely where we need it, and we're good to go. So with this piece selected, we can bring back this piece in the center. We can press A to add that to the visibility, select both of these pieces to add them to visibility, and from there we can begin making some transformations. So from here we could press Q, choose array, and we see that array is actually able to use the relative system instead of with constant, which can be toggled via a hotkey, which we could press H and look at that. But we will also be needing to add it to our .ui as something that will need to be done. In fact, we see that that's already been done, and I'm not even going to attempt my luck by changing this over to constant because we'll actually change the intended result. But just letting you know that we also added support for array to be able to support multiple objects by jumping between relative and constant. So from here we'll just click to apply and select both of these, and we'll just press S, X to scale them out in order to encompass the back area as well. And we also see that a little bit of movement might be required. So let's go back in here, make some adjustments just to ensure that we're not catching a bevel on a double wedge. In fact, we see that the bevel needs to be a little bit more stringent in order to handle this shading. So instead of moving it, let's just jump into bevel, alt scroll the wheel in order to bring the bevel angle down where it actually catches this. And we could do the same for this piece as well because it could use the help. And just like that, we've created this little screw wall with two windows in it. So we'll just select both of them, control click blank material to give them each a unique material. And I'm just going to select this piece, press Q, enter ever scroll, bring it back, and also perform a bool shift on this. And with our bool shift, we now have this piece brought back as a solid. We can press Alt M and just click on shift in order to make this a glass material. And we see that there's a little bit of Z fighting happening with the border, so sometimes I actually don't like that to happen, even though I know it doesn't show up in the renders. But Z fighting is Z fighting. You should get rid of it everywhere that you see it. So from here we'll just click on Displace, and we'll roll the wheel backwards once in order to jump to angle, and we can actually go in and adjust that out. Alternatively, we could have went inside of Displace, tab to go into the .ui, rolled this backwards to jump to normal because we have the same behavior in there, and then just shift drag this parameter to move it on a fine axis or a fine amount in order to get us to this intended result. So we jump over to the render, we see what we get. This piece is too light, new blank material. The second piece it gave us, also too light. Also, all these pieces it's given us just seemed like they were light all at the same time. But just like that, we were able to just quickly create a quick sidewall, and most of the sidewall is still non-destructive, meaning that I can press Alt W, jump over to Hops tool, and grab the screw and continue moving things if I want to make it taller or slimmer or whatever I want to do with it, and then press Alt V, B in order to scroll some lights in here. But we see that we probably don't have scene lights on, which is why the result isn't actually showing up whenever we're scrolling through all of our different setups, because I know that each of these setups is vastly more different than the last. So not seeing it show up as a result in view is definitely something to catch my eye. But just wanted to do a quick demo just showing a little bit about how I use Screw and Solidify when it comes to making sci-fi walls, just in case you're wondering. The other thing that you might be wondering is why we're adding these to some of the less prominent modifiers, and it's because, you know, we always work our way up towards adding these things towards our more crucial systems. For example, when you hear that .ui is on bevel, I feel that that will be a pretty big event. However, you know, we got to make sure that things are just right for us to go in and begin touching the progenitor of all of the modals inside of HardOps. So it's definitely something we're working towards, but we wanted to at least continue moving the .ui forward this update to a couple of more modals. I forgot that in the original one, I did a couple of maneuvers with the box cut where after I did a couple of slices, I would just cut some verticals down each of these panels just to add a little more visual interest to it. So let's at least do that to see what our final result would have looked like with a little bit of extra detailing. And so far so good. We can press D, switch over to box, and with box press W in order to turn this into a wedge and perform some wedge cuts. Nothing like wedge cuts to add additional detail to an area. We can press V in order to array. However, we want to reduce the amount to maybe 1. Jump over to the next area, cut in some wedges, and wedges are just a good time all around. So you know, it's my go-to way to add detail around boundaries. Also keep in mind that wedge is an operator inside of HardOps that you can use as well, located under your mesh tools. But using it with cutters inside of Boxcutter just feels a lot more organic, so can't recommend it enough. So just cutting our details in, we want to just work this area just slightly because it only takes seconds to really get this looking cool. And now let's turn off visualization and take a look at what we have, and that's a much better wall than what I left off on. My apologies about before. So map scroll is located in the Alt-M menu. If you have a bunch of maps set up in your preferences under a directory to point at, then whenever you select an object and you go under map scroll, you'll be able to basically scroll through some maps. In this case, we see that I actually don't have a folder specified. So I'll press Ctrl K and bring up my HardOps preferences, jump over to my properties, and underneath HardOps properties, we want to specify our maps. So I'll just take a moment to point out some maps. And now with tile map specified, whenever I select an object and press Alt-M, I can jump into map scroll. So we'll just jump in, press E to just jump to a random map. One of my favorite ways to get started with it. And while holding Control Shift and moving the mouse, I'm adding bump. And one of the issues that we had in the last release, that if you exited map scroll and you went back into it, your bump map would get reset. So now, looking at it up close, we're just going to jump back into map scroll. And after a bit of calculation, we see that it actually retains our bump map. So we're still making improvements with it. However, they will come a little bit steadier with time as we contemplate the direction that we want to take this in truly. But just letting you know that we're still at the will with making improvements with map scroll. In fact, I want to bring this up and actually scale this up so it doesn't look so repetitious, and then click. And from there, we can see map scroll in action. So to demonstrate Weld, we'll take this cube and just delete it, and we'll Shift A, add a grid mesh, and from here press D inside of Boxcutter and switch to circle, and we'll just use this center dot to create a cut through, but we'll press Ctrl X and make it a knife. And from here we now have this selection of vertices, and in edit mode you can press Q and go under add modifier, and you can use Weld on a specific selection which will make into a vertice group. However, you could also make a vertice group in edit mode and use Weld from object mode and Control Shift scroll in order to jump between various groups in the event that you want to actually weld on a particular vertex group only, excluding everything else around it. So similar to edit mode, we just added the support also for object mode. So to demonstrate some improvements that's been had with our claw system, we must make this cube a little more interesting. So we'll tap into edit mode, right click, subdivide, Shift R, and now our cube is a little bit more interesting. Let's Control 1, put a subdivision on top, and we're at least ready to begin. If we press Q and go under add modifier, we can add a cloth, and let's just click play. So we see that it's already falling down, and that's because of gravity. So we click on gravity, we're able to type in 0. Let's also set it up to restart our timeline on value changes. So now we have our pillow basically sitting in place because every time we roll the wheel, it'll actually update the timeline. So from here, let's lower our pressure to something like 0.3 just to have a little fun with it. And let's also play with our shrink. So I'm just scrolling up my shrink to give it as much shrink as needed for this, just to get something really interesting. And we could just click to apply. So you saw me go in and create this cloth object by adjusting the gravity in order to get it to sit still. However, generally whenever you first use cloth, there's a pinning group that's actually created for it. So we added an option for users to be able to go through and select which vertex group that they're pinning from. So right now we're actually pinning on Hops cloth, which uses all the sharp marked edges. If we were to go back to frame 1 with shift left arrow and we jump into weight paint mode, we see that we basically have no weight set. So let's just do a little bit of painting just for fun. Because we had no sharp marked edges, no edges were added to the vertex group, resulting in our cube just falling down. But if we press Q and we go under cloth, we now can click on play. And let's actually put our gravity back. So now we actually have it sagging, but it's using our vertice group. Well, what if we actually wanted to use 0 gravity? Or what if we actually wanted to use some gravity, but we wanted to use no vertex group? Well, now these options are actually possible inside of the HardOps cloth modal. So in the event that you need to actually pin a very particular vertex group and then get in and deal with things more intimately, you can. And then of course, after exiting, we'll just go through and add another subdivision on top of it to just get our cloth looking a little bit better. But anytime we want to go through and edit it, we can always just go back in and just modify our settings on the fly, and then of course play it back to get the sim. And you can also choose to apply your modifiers on exit and then click to apply them whenever you exit, which will apply those modifiers that built up to this moment. So to create something a little more interesting, let's press Q, sharpen, and we've now sharpened some random lines. However, we want to unmark them as well, because we don't want them to be sharp marked, we just want them to be calculated whenever we activate our cloth again. So let's bring up our cloth and let's click it, and we see that everything's just being held in place. So let's just apply that without actually applying everything, and then we can go in edit mode and actually unmark this, because now whenever we simulate it, the vertex group has already been generated. We'll just put a subdivision on top of that, and we're able to exponentially keep playing with our cloth in order to get a desired result. In fact, I'm going to press Q, go under add modifier, go back to cloth, and just keep playing with the shrink in order to get just the amount of bulge that I want happening with this particular cloth. And then we could even go back in and add advanced levels of gravity. So if we want to bring it down by a lot, we can, and just have this being some saggy drooping cloth by just increasing the gravity to say something like 60, which will really bring it down. And then we could just roll in pressure depending on what we're going for with this. But just wanted to show some improvements that's been had with cloth and adding vertex groups and dealing with them on the fly, as well as manipulating them and disabling them in the middle of your sim if needed. In closing, I just want to say that while it can seem daunting that there's a lot of updates and things that happens over time with HardOps and Boxcutter, our goal, of course, is to keep muscle memory alive and prevent users from having to retrain themselves on various workflows by simply expanding on the lore of the tools that we've already written. So our goal, of course, is to keep users working without interruption, and that, of course, is the purpose of these updates as well, to seek to enhance and improve the experience without any sort of compromise. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for watching. I'll wrap this video, and I'll see you guys next time.